من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين حجة ابن الحسن روحي وأرواحنا لتراب مقدمه الفداء أما بعد أيها المؤمنون أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله. Firstly, I would like to advise myself before I advise anybody else to practice taqwa, to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to practice this steadfastness and abstinence away from our nafs. Before I like to talk and before I begin my khutbah, I'd just like to make a note that there has been a death within the community, and I would like to send my condolences to the family and those who are left behind. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala elevate her status and elevate her rank amongst the Ahlul Bayt salamullah alayhim ajma'een. Please recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Having taqwa means to have steadfastness, means to have abstinence from your nafs. In this khutbah, I would like to talk about our desires and our attachments to this dunya, or in other words, in the phrases that we receive from our Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, is something that we call as hubbud dunya, or having a desire for this world, having an attachment to this materialistic life. And the effects of this attachment, what are the effects of having an attachment with the dunya, with materialism? In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a very beautiful ayah, which I would like to speak about in this khutbah inshallah. He says, زُيِّنَ لِلنَّاسِ حُبُّ الشَّهَوَاتِ مِنَ النِّسَاءِ وَالْبَنِينِ وَالْقَنَاطِيرِ الْمُقَنطَرَةِ مِنَ الذَّهَبِ وَالْفِضَّةِ وَالْخَيْلِ الْمُسَوَّمَةِ وَالْأَنْعَامِ وَالْحَرْثِ ذَلِكَ مَتَاعُ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَاللَّهُ عِنْدَهُ حُسْنُ الْمَآبِ. He says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has beautified certain things. He's decorated certain things for a human being. That when a human being looks at these things, he looks at it as a decoration. He becomes attracted towards it. These are the certain things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created in this world, because this is how a human being becomes attached to these things. And I'm going to mention a few of these things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned in this verse. What did He make beautiful? What did He decorate inside of this dunya? The first thing He mentions is hubbu shahwat. This nafs of ours that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created, this addiction towards our desires comes from our nafs. This shahwat, these desires, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made them as something that is decorated, something that we look at and then we fall for it. We move close to it and we become attached to these things, to our desires. So hubbu shahwat is the number one thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decorated. Zuyyina linnas, that He made this as a decoration piece inside of this world. It becomes such an attachment, dear brothers, that this eventually turns into love. This attachment, when I become so attached towards it, it slowly turns into love towards this hubbu shahwat. But eventually this hubbu shahwat is going to take me to Jahannam. This is where it's going to take me eventually. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, O people who I have created, these things that I have created that I'm going to mention going forward, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that I've created this as a decoration piece in this world. It's yourself if you ignite your nafs. It's however you ignite your own nafs. If you ignite it, you will be the one who will be attached to these worldly attachments. Therefore, to fulfill all of these desires that we have inside of us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created certain decorations. And He has made these matters desirable. زُيِّنَ لِلنَّاسِ حُبُّ الشَّهْوَاتِ مِنَ النِّسَاءِ. The second matter that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decorated inside of this world is women. Women are a desirable creation. This is something that mankind desires. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states in the Quran, that He created this as a creation, that a human being can fulfill his desires through this creation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the female in a way where people can, or human beings can, fulfill the desires through this creation. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, زُيَّنَ لِلنَّاسِ حُبُّ الشَّهَوَاتِ مِنَ النِّسَاءِ وَالْبَنِينَ. That our children become a reason for attachment to this dunya. So first it's our حُبُّ الشَّهَوَاتِ, our love and our desire for desires itself. And then it's nisa, the women. This is another desire that people become attached to. Wal-banin, children. And I'll give an example over here. Our children grow up within society. We care about their education. We care about their deen. We care about what their status is within side of society. We are always worried for our children all the time about what's going to happen to them. Are they going to have a stable future? Are they going to have a stable education, for example? This attachment to our children, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, is also a decoration piece that I've created inside of this dunya. Our constant worry for our children, for example, and this is why our Holy Prophet of Islam, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, salli ala Muhammad, he says, Rahimallahu abdan a'ana walduhu ala birrihi bil ihsan ilayh wa ta'allufa lahu wa ta'alimuhu wa ta'dibuh. That may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy be upon the servant that teaches his child with compassion and mercy the manners and etiquettes of Islam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to teach your children with compassion and mercy. So going back to the ayah that I was speaking about, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made women, children, and hubbu shahawat as things that are decoration pieces inside of this world. The third matter, which he mentions in the same ayah, وَالْقَنَاطِيرِ الْمُقَنْطَرَةِ وَالْقَنَاطِيرِ الْمُقَنْطَرَةِ مِنَ الذَّهَبِ وَالْفِضَّةِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the desire for having gold and silver, the desire for mal, the desire for having extra wealth inside of our lives, this is another thing that is created as a decoration piece inside of this world. When we look at it, when we look at mal, we become astonished. We see awe inside of ourselves. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we have created this as a piece of decoration inside of this world. At the time of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, fidda wa dhahab was something that was in the market. Gold and silver was something that used to be traded with, was the monetary value of what we call cash today, of what we call money today. This is what gold and silver was back then. So this example is relative for every single era. Every single example in this ayah is relative to every single era of this world. And the Quran, obviously, because it is the final message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it compiles all of the religions into one. And that's why there's the best of examples for every single era inside of this world. And every single nation, every single tribe, every single style of living, they are all addressed inside of the Quran. This is the beauty and the miracle of the Quran itself. So the chase for the wealth, the chase for this dunya, and the chase for having more wealth inside of our lives is the criteria of the societies that we live in. This society that we live in, the main criteria, the success rate of a human being is based on money. However much more wealth you have, you are more successful within society. Human value is based on monetary value, in fact. If you have a stable job, if you have a house that is paid off, if you have the latest car, if you have these three things, you are a person that has succeeded within inside of the society. Outside of that, if a person doesn't have all three of these, that person has not succeeded within inside of this society. He's struggling with inside a system. He's struggling with inside of a cycle. This system that is based in the West is based on monetary value. However much you succeed inside of your life is based on how much money you make inside of your life. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that this hub that you have inside of you, this love and attachment that you have towards wealth, this chase that you have, it's zuyyana linnas. It's created as a decoration piece inside of this world. It's something that is extremely, extremely temporary. As somebody just wakes up in the morning and he likes to check his bank balance every single day, and he sees how much he has in his account and he smiles, and he wakes up tomorrow and he sees there's a little bit more and then there's a little bit less, he gets worried. This cycle that we are in every single day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this is just a decoration piece inside of this world. Do not chase it. Do not run after it. If you run after it, it's almost like you are going to get bit by a snake. This is the mithal of the dunya. According to our Ayyamma Ma'sumin alayhim as-salam, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala. They also mention that this world is just a mere decoration. It's a mere transit towards the hereafter. So the desire and the chase, which is made desirable by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it isn't something to be arrogant for if we have this inside of our lives. It isn't something to be arrogant about at all. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the way He gives us this, He will take it away from us. And Ayatollah Jawadi Amuli hafadhahullah, he has a very, very beautiful quote. He says, similar to how a mother takes away feeding her child milk, one day it is taken away from the child. Similarly, position, mal, rank within society, job, status, the title of Ayatollah, the title of ulama, sheikh, doctor, lawyer, scholar, whatever you have, just similar to how the mother takes away this milk from the child, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will also take this away from you as well. He says, in dunya guzarandanist. This world is a transit towards the hereafter. We may think that these titles are lasting forever, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, similar to how the mother takes away this milk from the child, similarly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take away this position, this rank and job that we have inside of this world. Amir al-Mu'mineen, salamullah alayh, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, who is the master of both worlds. He is Qasimun Nar wal Jannah. He is the one who will be the differentiator between the hellfire and the heavens. He has all of the fortunes of this dunya within inside of his reach. Everything within inside the hands of Amir al-Mu'mineen salamullah alayh is the fortunes of this dunya and the hereafter, is the knowledge of this world and the hereafter. He is the one who comes in the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he says, Mawlaya ya Mawlaya, Anta al-Ghaniyo wa ana al-Faqir. That, oh my Mawla, you are the wealthy and I am the poor. وَهَلْ يَرْحَمُ الْفَقِيرَ إِلَّا الْغَنِي. That how could it be possible that the poor can have mercy on the wealthy? Not in the stance that Amir al-Mu'mineen salamullah alayh was living in complete poverty, although our Mawla salamullah alayh, he lived in such a style that his life would be based on similar to how the poor people would live. He wouldn't chase after the dunya. This dunya wasn't a thing for him. And then when he goes into the presence of Allah, he continues to say, Mawlaya ya Mawlaya, Anta al-Alimu wa ana al-Jahil. That you are the all knowledgeable and I am the complete ignorant. This same Amir al-Mu'mineen salamullah alayh, who the Prophet peace be upon him says, Ana madinatul ilm wa aliyun babuha. That I am the city of knowledge and Ali is the gate of the city of knowledge. He comes into the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he says that you are the all knowledgeable and I am the complete ignorant. Allahu Akbar. This humility that Amir al-Mu'mineen salamullah alayhi shows in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is something to be recognized with. Amir al-Mu'mineen salamullah alayhi needs to be recognized with this munajat. He says in a very beautiful hadith, he says, An-nasu fi dunya bil amwal wa fil akhirati bil a'mal. That people, mankind of this world, they are recognized with their wealth. Mankind are recognized with their cause. Mankind are recognized with whatever property and possession they have inside of this world. Wa fil akhirati bil a'mal. And in the hereafter, they are recognized with their actions, with their deeds. They are recognized with their a'mal. So in the grave, they are not going to ask, what was your bank balance? In the grave, they are not going to ask, what car did you drive? In the grave, they are not going to ask these questions. Rather, they'll ask, Man Rabbuk? Who was your Lord? Man Imamuk? Man Nabiyuk? These simple questions that a little child can answer. If you ask a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old today, who is your Lord? He'll say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you ask a child, who is your prophet? He will say, my prophet is Holy Prophet of Islam sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahumma. And if you ask man imamuk, he'll say, my Mawla is Amirul Mu'mineen salamullah alayhi. But in the grave, why does it become so difficult to state this? In the grave it becomes difficult to state this because the realities of our nafs, the realities of what I had inside of my dunya, inside of my life, this will come into reflection inside of my grave. इंसान की जो हकीकी चेहरा है वो कब्र में रोशन होगा, वो सामने आएगी, इंसान का हकीकी चेहरा सामने आएगा, ना ये कि वो जो ज़बान के ऊपर जारी रखता है हर दिन, बल्कि वो जो इंसान की फितरत के अंदर जो पाया जाता है वो ही कब्र में नजर आएगा. वो whatever is inside of the insan's essence is going to be shown inside of the grave. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The fourth matter, so we mentioned 3 or 4 things. We mentioned women, children, and hubbu shahwat. These are the 3 things where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made as a decoration piece inside of this world. The fourth matter, he says, wal khayl al musawwama. Khayl al musawwama, at the time of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, branded horses, horses that were beautiful. These were things that were desirable within inside of society. To have a nice horse, this is something that people would be recognized with. The social rank would be based on this horse as well. However much they would earn would be based on whatever horse they would have as well. So if a person who is riding a donkey, for example, would be considered from the lowest rank of the society. Similar to how today. Yesterday it was horses, today it was cars, for example. The person who has the latest car, people look at this person and say that this person is wealthy. This person is doing well inside of his life. But the person who has a very, very old car, that person is looked at and they probably think that he has a job that's not paying him too much. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this khayl al-musawwama, these branded horses, whether that be in the time of the Prophet or the time of today, this is mentioned for every single era. Like I said, the Quran is not just for the time of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him. It's for every single era. He says, wal khayl al-musawwama, this is the ornament and the decorations of the world. This dunya shows it to you as something that's amazing. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will take this away from everybody. If you just think about it for a second, people who have multiple cars, one day they drive this BMW, for example, and they get tired of driving it. And then they say, I want to drive this Mercedes. And they get tired of this car. And they sell both of the cars to get a brand new car. And when they get tired of this car, they continue on in this cycle. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that this cycle was going to continue on. You're going to continue diving into towards your nafs inside of this materialistic lifestyle of yours, and one day I will take this away from you. इंसान की कभी कभार पूरी ज़िंदगी इसी चक्कर में चलता रहता है कि एक गाड़ी ले ली, फिर उसके बाद बेच दिया उसको, फिर दोबारा एक और नई गाड़ी खरीद ली. ये इंसान इन्हीं चक्करों में फिरता रहता है. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, come out of this cycle. Think about your akhirah. Think about your grave. Think about your qabr. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking us to do. So what's beautiful about this ayah is that, like I said, every single era is mentioned within inside of the Quran. For every single qaba'il, for every single shu'ub, for every single tribe and nation, there's an example. He says, wal an'amu wal harth. This is the final part of the ayah, and I'm going to end my khutbah inshallah. He says, wal an'amu wal harth. For people who live in villages, for people who live in farms, their ornaments and decorations of their life is cattle. So the farmers and the villagers who have a lot of cattle, who have herd, who have many animals, they are considered as rich farmers. But the farmer that only has a few animals, that person is considered a poor farmer. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that even the person who lives in the villages, he has this desire to have more inside of his life. Every single person in this world, their desire is to have more and more inside of this dunya. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says at the end, He summarizes this entire ayah. He says, ذَلِكَ مَتَاعُ الدُّنْيَا, that this is the luggage of this world. this is the luggage of your temporary 60 to 70 years of life. Wallahu indahu husnul ma'ab. He says, the best of the pleasures are the ones in the hereafter. The best of the pleasures are the one in the akhirah. And I teach religious education in a school. I had a very interesting question from one of the children. He says to me that, can you describe to me what is heaven? Because in the Quran it says rivers of milk and honey, this will be flowing. He says that whatever I have inside of this dunya is better than rivers of milk and honey. This is what he said to me. And he asked me a very, a striking question, that what can you prove to me that heaven is better than what we have inside of this dunya? And our Mawla Amirul Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib, salamullah alayh, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. He has a very beautiful khutbah inside of Nahj al-Balagha in which he states the intricate details of Jannah. And he says and I quote this from the Nahj al-Balagha, he says that if a human being ever knew the slight glimpse of Bihisht, of Jannah, he would forget all of the pleasures of this dunya. That's simplified within this one quote from Amir al-Mu'mineen salamullah alayhi in Nahj al-Balagha. But my reply was very simple to him. I says that I don't know what's inside of heaven, but I know one thing for a fact, that if I do reach heaven, I will be in the neighborhood of Hazrat Zahra salamullah alayha. I will be in the neighborhood of the Ahlul Bayt if I reach towards heaven, and that is enough for me. Just being in the neighborhood and the jawar of the A'imma is something that is better than anything that I can think about. So that was my response to him. But if we ever think to ourselves that whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised for us in the hereafter, is it worth sacrificing for this short and temporary dunya of ours? It really isn't. And it's something to really think about, that our attachments and our desires of this dunya are something that we have to break inside of our lives. If we are able to break these materialistic attachments, only then we can listen to the voice of the oppressed. Only then we can listen to the of the Mazloom. And I will speak about this more in the next khutbah, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدْ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدْ لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدْ. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي لا مضاد له ولا شبيه له الذي ليس كمثله شيء والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين الهداة المهديين وصل على وصي رسول رب العالمين إمام المتقين أمير المؤمنين مولانا علي بن أبي طالب اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على أم الحسنين فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على الإمامين الحسنين حسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة اللهم صل على أئمة الهدى والهداة الأخيار والأئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على مولانا صاحب الزمان اللهم صل على السلام عليك يا بقية الله في أرضه السلام عليك يا وعد الله الذي ضمنه اللهم عجل في فرج مولانا صاحب الزمان واجعلنا من أعوانه وأنصاره أما بعد أيها المؤمنون والمؤمنات أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله Again, in the second khutbah, I would like to advise myself first before I advise anybody else to practice piety and to practice this abstinence from our nafs. Taqwa means to have abstinence away from your desires. And the reason to why any khatib says, Usikum wa nafsi bi taqwa, that I advise myself first, is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran towards the people who like to preach and who like to give khutbahs and who speak for the Muslimin, He says, أَتَأْمُرُونَ النَّاسَ وَتَنْسَوْنَ أَنفُسَكُمْ, that you go ahead and you call people towards birr. أَتَأْمُرُونَ النَّاسَ بِالْبِرِّ وَتَنْسَوْنَ أَنفُسَكُمْ, that you call people towards doing good and practicing piety, but you forget yourselves. You forget your own nafs. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking directly to those who hold this opportunity of speaking towards the Muslims, that whenever you want to go and speak on behalf of the Muslims and go ahead and give a khutbah, you should be the one who should be referring to yourself first. So this is why in the khutbahs of our ma'sumin salamullah alayh, when they would want to advise, they would always say usikum wa nafsi, that they would advise themselves. So the last khutbah that we spoke about was the decorations that what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created for us. This is what we spoke about in the last khutbah. It is our desires and our attachments that make us more fond of this dunya. It's our desires that make us attached and more fond of this materialistic lifestyle. But the greed for materialism, dear brothers, the greed for materialism doesn't only end with being far away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, rather it blocks the soul from hearing the voice of the oppressed. Having hubbud dunya, having a greed for this world, having love for this world, it blocks the soul, it blocks the heart from hearing the voices of the madloom, of the person who is being oppressed today. You see people who live through tragedies, who live through calamities, who live through the most difficult times, but nothing affects them. There's not a single frown on their face. There's nothing that moves them. And that type of person is the person who is delved too deep inside of this dunya. One of the effects of hubbud dunya, and the main effect, is that it blocks the heart of listening to and becoming sympathetic to the person who is the oppressed in this world. This is one of the dangers of the attachments to this world. If the stomach is full all the time, if somebody's stomach is always full, how can he ever think about the poor person? If the person's stomach is always full, how can he think about the hungry? If a person is always living in luxury and comforts, how can he ever fathom the brutality and the victimization of the Muslims who are living under oppression and tyranny? It's impossible for us to think about it because we live in our luxuries and our comforts. It's not possible for us to put ourselves inside of their shoes. We will probably cry for a couple of minutes for those people who actually have this sympathy. That's about it. After that, we'll return back to our daily lives. We cannot live inside the shoes of those who are oppressed because we are far away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And from our ma'sumin alayhimus salam, there's a hadith that stated that the distance between the sky and the earth is the screams of a madloom. The oppressed person in this world, the distance between the earth and the sky is that scream of the madloom. There's no hijab, there's no veil between the oppressed person and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah listens to the person who is oppressed. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala watches those who are just watching. He's taking account of these type of people as well. But we live in a life where there's so much satisfaction, there's so much desire, that there's no room for the suffering of people at all. And those who have greed for power of this world, those who have a greed for having more power and gaining more political gain and more land inside of this world, those people, they eventually reach to a point where they cannot see humanity anymore. They cannot differentiate. They cannot look at a human being and say, this is a human being. They look at him and just target him as a number within inside of the system. Because their criteria is hubbud dunya, which is why our Mawla Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu salam, He says, حُبُّ الدُّنْيَا رَأْسَ كُلَّ خَطِيئَةٍ. That the spearhead of all of the sins of this world, whether it be the greater or smaller sins, is حُبُّ الدُّنْيا. Love for this world is a greed. The greed for this world is the spearhead of all of the sins. तमाम जितने भी गुनाह हैं इस दुनिया में, तमाम गुनाहान उसके रअस के ऊपर हुब्ब दुनिया है. The spearhead of all of the sins is the love for this world. And this just doesn't apply for the Muslims. This applies for every single human being. And if we look at a contemporary example of today, we have a look at the US as an example. We'll take them as an example. $150 billion was stolen from Iraq from the 2003 war. They murdered 432,000 people. For what reason? Under the pretext of weapons of mass destruction that never existed. They were after oil, they were after money. Most of the wars that are taking place inside of this world, that have taken place previously and are taking place, are greed, are based on greed, are based on gain for this dunya. Which is why our Mawla says that this is the spearhead of all of the sins. The spearhead of all of the sins is having a love for this dunya. And he also says in a very beautiful hadith, حُبُّ الدُّنْيَا يُفْسِدُ الْعَقْلِ. That the love and the greed for this world, it pollutes the intellect. It pollutes the intellect. A person cannot think anymore. A person cannot use his intellect and differentiate between haqq and batil because of his love for this dunya. And then he says, وَيُصِمُّ الْقَلْبَ عَنْ سَمَاعِ الْحِكْمَةِ. That it poisons the heart to such a point where the person cannot listen to any wisdom anymore. Even if the person is telling the truth, that person cannot hear the wisdom from this truth. Because this hubb dunya has overtaken his life. This hubb dunya has overtaken his heart. And then he says, وَيُوجِبُ الْأَلِيمَ الْعِقَابِ. That this love and attachment to materialism and materialistic lifestyle is something that will be the reason for the adhab of the hereafter. If we relate to the world that we live in today, like I said, the wars that are based on oil, the wars that are based on political gain and money and advantage of people, this is all based on love for the dunya and the desire for more. The greed of the greedy powers today is to take advantage of the poor people, is to take advantage of the mustad'afeen of the world today, and to keep them under poverty and in poor infrastructures so that they can keep themselves at power all the time. This is the main backing behind most of the wars of the world today. And I'll give another example. 66,000 barrels of oil are stolen from Syria every single day. It's a Muslim country. But because of their greed, the enemies of Islam, their greed for breaking this infrastructure of Muslim countries, they are doing certain things within inside of the Muslim countries that are, honestly, they are unreal if we think about it. It's outside of our reach. We can't think about these things. And I would like to just briefly mention the massacre that we saw this week. And it's something that is unprecedented, something that we have never witnessed. The brutality of such since the World War II. That the Al-Ahli hospital within inside of Gaza, it was mercilessly attacked and it was brought down to rubble. There were 700 plus sick people who were inside of that hospital. They were seeking cure. There were injured people. There were people who were trying to seek shelter. And they were struck by a missile. This sort of violence, dear brothers, is unprecedented. I don't think I've ever seen something like this inside of my entire life. I don't think none of us have witnessed something like this. This sort of dhulm that we are seeing taking place today is honestly something to really, really be concerned about. And it has brought the blood of our hearts out, seeing this sort of dhulm that is happening inside of the world. So, our message today is that the people and the countries that are participating within inside of this genocide, the countries that are participating with inside of this massacre, they need to end their support immediately. They need to end the support immediately. It's very, very unfortunate that we have our Prime Minister that claims to represent this entire country and claim that they stand with Israel in the darkest hour. But the truth is that not every single person in this country stands with you, and neither do you speak for every single person within inside of this country. It's utterly shameful that the mainstream media, the way they portray the picture today, and they make it seem like as if that one incident of the hospital attack which killed 800 plus people, it was a mistake. This is honestly utterly shameful. We have absolutely no words for it. But the truth is that the blood of the heart of the Muslimin is currently flowing today. Everybody is feeling this pain. Everybody is feeling the pain of the Palestinians today. And this pain, inshallah, will lead to the zuhur of Imam Zaman Ajjallahu Ta'ala Farj Sharif. The Holy Prophet of Islam sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, Allahumma salli ala. He says, ittaqu da'wat al-madhlum, that be afraid of the screams of the oppressor. Be afraid of the screams of the oppressed one. Be afraid of the person who is oppressed. وَإِن كَانَ كَافِرًا, even if that oppressed person is a kafir, even if that oppressed person is a disbeliever, be afraid of their voices for help. فَإِنَّهُ لَيْسَ دُونَهُ حِجَابٌ, there is no veil between that person and the oppressed, between themselves and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Be afraid of the voices and the screams of those who are being oppressed today. So the largest massacre that has taken place since the World War II, and the truth is that was the largest massacre that we've seen, was the heart-wrenching incident of the Al-Ahli hospital that we were witnessed on Wednesday, where over 700 people were just taken out within one missile. It's something that has become clearer than crystal today for everybody. Every single Muslim in the world, it's become clear as crystal that today the mission of those people who are the perpetrators, those people who are attacking the innocent lives in Gaza, their mission is not only to obliterate a people, but rather their mission is a war against Islam. Their mission is war against humanity. Their mission is war against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Their mission is to prepare for the zuhur of Imam Zaman Ajjallahu Ta'ala Faraj Sharif. That's their mission. They are prepared for the zuhur. How prepared are we for the zuhur of Imam Zaman? And just quite coincidentally, and this is also in our riwayat, it's not something that's a coincidence in fact. In our riwayat it is stated there will come a time where on the lips of every single person in this world there will be a call for Imam Zaman Ajjallahu Ta'ala Faraj Sharif. And we can see that even in the Ahlul Sunnah Maktab, in different factions, in different sects, people are questioning, where is Mahdi? Where is this Mahdi? Who is this Mahdi? You can see on social media, people are constantly asking, who is Al-Mahdi? This word, this name that is reverberating around the Muslim Ummah, this shows that this is one step closer towards the zuhur of Hazrat Baqiyatullah al-A'zam, Imam Zaman Ajjallahu Ta'ala Faraj Sharif. Allahumma salli ala. But some of these crimes that are being committed today, they are heart-wrenching. And it's something that when we look at, it brings tears towards our eyes. That when we see a father carry the body pieces of his son inside of a plastic bag and walk around and does not know what to do with it. A father sees his child under a rubble and he tries to take out this child under the rubble. These scenes that we are seeing outside of Gaza today is something that is very, very heart-wrenching, and we sympathize with each and every single Gaza member, and we sympathize with all of the Palestinians today for what is going on today in Gaza. But the sheer truth at the end, I would like to say at the end of my khutbah, is that the mainstream media and the news outlets such as BBC, Fox, CNN, they are also liable for misinformation. They are liable for the bloods of the thousands of people who are being massacred today. Their misinformation are deviating people. They're manipulating people. They are purposefully doing this. and they are backed by Israel as well. They are 100% backed by this country. And just a few hours ago, today's news on Friday, there was news that a church was bombed inside of Palestine where Muslims and Christians alike were using for shelter, and there were only women and children and regular people who were living inside. But it was bombed mercilessly and it was turned into rubble just a few hours ago. And they announced today that today is the start of the war of Israel. It hasn't even started yet. After all of this destruction, after all of this massacre, they are still waiting to do a ground invasion. And once they do this ground invasion, their hadaf, their mission is to obliterate 2.1 million people. This is something that is beyond the words of any sort of words. In any moment of history, we have never seen something like this. Our duty, brothers and sisters, and make this a final note of my talk today, our duty today is to stand for Palestine. Our duty today is to try to create awareness. That's the least that we can do. And our main duty out of all of these duties is to do dua and seek a connection with Imam Zaman Ajallah Ta'ala Faraj Sharif. We have to seek this connection towards Imam Zaman. Because if he reappears and he does the zuhur inside of this world, and we do not have a connection with our Imam, we are lost. We won't be without Imam Zaman. It's most definite that we increase in our connection with Hujjat ibn al-Hasan, Imam Zaman Ajallah Ta'ala Faraj Sharif. Allahumma salli ala. But the Muslim Ummah currently is just watching. They are just watching as the fathers are gathering their children's body pieces under the rubble. They are just witnessing this. They are watching this every single day. We are constantly watching this. So the scenes that we are watching are absolutely surreal. They are not something that we have ever thought about previously. And the name of Imam Zaman is on everybody's lips at the moment. But there will come a time where the pain will reach to such a point where everybody will start to scream for Ibn al-Hasan. Everybody will start to scream for Imam Zaman. And inshallah we see the day where the pain and the oppression on the Palestinians will be ended with the zuhur of our Mawla Imam Zaman Ajallah Ta'ala Faraj Sharif. At the end, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. At the end, my dear brothers who are sitting here, let us all raise our hands and do a dua for those who are currently being bombarded every single day. A dua for the Palestinians, for the children of Gaza, for the women and for those who are oppressed in this world today. Allahumma kun li ikhwanina fi Filastin. Allahumma kun li ikhwanina fi Filastin. Allahumma kun lahum mu'ayyidan wa dhahira. Allahumma farrij hammahum wansurhum. Allahumma naffis karbahum. Allahumma naffis karbahum. Allahumma dawi jarhahum. Allahumma afi mubtalahum. Allahumma ashfi mardahum. Allahumma kun lahum awnan wa nusra. Allahumma ya muntaqimu ya jabbar alayka biman zalamahum. Alayka bi'aduwika wa aduwihum. يا قوي يا عزيز اللهم حرر المسجد الأقصى من الغاصبين اللهم آذوا عبادك المؤمنين واعتدوا على المصلين اللهم زلزلهم ودمرهم اللهم لا ترفع لهم في الأقصى راية اللهم لا ترفع لهم في الأقصى راية اللهم اجعل أهل فلسطين ومسلمين في كل مكان في إحسانك وفضلك وأمانك وضمانك اللهم إنا لا نرغب إليك في دولة كريمة تعز بها الإسلام وأهله وتضل بها النفاق وأهله وتجعلنا فيها من الدعاة إلى طاعتك والقادة إلى سبيلك وترزقنا بها كرامة الدنيا والآخرة اللهم إنا نشكو فقد نبينا وغيبة ولينا وقلة عددنا وكثرة عدونا وتظاهر الزمان علينا اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك توعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله